Easier.
Yeah, this is my lifesaver. I also have this, and I take notes when
That's
I
perfect.
am around. But maybe I should actually. This looks so shabby. Should I have this, or should I just have the thing? Does this look
You can
better?
keep it. It's not that bad.
Looks used. Look, this is. I don't have kids, but I do have a dog. He's got a very big nose.
Oh.
Um.
Oh.
Oh shit.
Also, of course, welcome to the online audience that we have on the stream. And of course, big thank you to Avalanche Studios who are sponsoring our breakfast that we're going to enjoy in an hour today. I'm Elin, Community Development Manager here at Game Habitat. Yeah, I'll be your host for today. First things first, always mentioning, if you need the bathrooms, you find them down the stairs in the back there. And also in case of emergency, there's a fire exit so you just go there in case something happens within the next hour. Yeah, so what's gonna happen here today then? The agenda, I'm gonna do a short intro of Game Habitat and GEM, followed by presentation with some fresh data on this topic. And then we have a panel with the people representing both games and tech. And a Q&A, so if you have questions, you save them for later. And then we're gonna have some breakfast. And everyone who's joining online, you can just feel free to comment your questions, and we're also gonna pick them up later in the Q&A. So, introduction to Game Habitat. Community-focused non-profit organization, a cluster organization working with games in southern Sweden and enabling the best environment for game development. And we're based here in Malmö, but we're covering both Blekinge and Skåne. So we're supported by our members, 40 plus members we have now, guardians as well as our public and private partners. And our members representing the whole ecosystem from the region that we are also working with as Game Habitat. The house we're in, called DevHub, opened in 2018 and is an office building and development hub for game development. It's a perfect place for game developers to come here, make new friends, grow their studio, find partners as well. And as far as we know, actually, DevHub is the biggest in the world hub that is dedicated for game development. We have room for more, I want to say. There is still room, so if you or anyone you know is interested in finding a place to work, you're very welcome to contact us. And also, the event spaces and office, not office rooms, but meeting rooms that we have is also available. So just reach out if you want to be here. So inclusion and diversity is a very big focus for us here at Game Habitat. And every year we organize GEM Week, which is the third year in a row, actually, that we, together with partners from the community, organize a full week of events and initiatives to support and highlight diversity, inclusion, and equality in games. Yeah. And it's always happening around the 8th of March, so International Women's Day. So yeah, very excited to do this for the third time in a row. So what is GEM then? The initiative was created to drive and support inclusion and, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, that's good to say. An inclusive culture for game developers in southern Sweden as well. And it's run by Game Habitat, but we are also represented by an amazing advisory board, which you can see here, who's part of that as well. So what GEM is working with, we're both supporting and empowering female game developers and creating spaces, having activities that can be coaching in professional growth, networking event, mentorship program as well. But we're also supporting studios in this work as well to increase diversity, inclusion, and equality in our community. Yeah, that's it from me. Let's dive into today's topic. So I want to welcome Louise and Daniela, who's going to share some highlights from their master thesis from last year.
Thank you. Okay, hi. Maybe we can also say that we're nervous. No. So my name is Louise, and
I'm Daniela.
Yeah, and last year we were doing our master's thesis in the program of Leadership and Organization, Societal Challenges and Organizational Change. Very long name. It's at Malmö University. And we have always been very interested in the topic of diversity and inclusion. But the gaming industry for us was very far away, actually. But then briefly discussing with our supervisor, she just mentioned the gaming industry, and we were just like, the gaming industry is actually quite big in in Malmö. So what about the gaming industry? And then we started to do a little bit of digging and research, and then we stumbled on a RISE new report from 2023 in January. And in this report, they were writing a lot about how the gaming industry in Sweden is like a really huge asset for growth, but that there is also some challenges when it comes to sustainability and diversity inclusion. So we figured, okay, this could actually be a good way of looking into this topic. So doing that, we felt like it was very interesting from our point of view to look into like what is the understanding of diversity and inclusion from the individuals that works within these organizations. So we decided to do a qualitative study to interview people that work within the organizations. And then we felt like we wanted to see people from different roles, so we didn't specify in like one specific profession, but we wanted to talk to managers, game developers and designers to see like how do you define diversity and inclusion and what are your thoughts about it. So our research question was, how is diversity and inclusion understood within the gaming industry, and how can it be understood through inequality regimes? And inequality regimes is a theory by Joan Acker, which explains like the power dynamics within organizations and how inequality is reproduced. Yeah, maybe I can leave it to you as well. Oh yeah.
Yeah, perfect. It sounds. So a little bit of, after all the interviews we had, we of course analyzed the information, the results, and I'm gonna go directly to the most important and the meaty of what we did. I don't think that. Yeah, I think this is better. So we started finding out and figuring like an idea of what was the perception of diversity and inclusion, how is perceived inside of the industry in South Sweden. And I'm just gonna add that this is super important because there is a close connection between innovation and diversity and inclusion. And innovation is the key element for the gaming industry to survive, to thrive, to expand, to grow. So we asked these questions about the perception of the gaming industry, and what we found out is that intuitively people know about diversity and inclusion. They have an understanding that it doesn't have to be academic, but it's a living work understanding of diversity and inclusion. But we also find out that in the perception of diversity and inclusion is very related to gender. So people can see that there is a gender imbalance in the industry. They know that there is not that many diversity in gender, but there is not a clear link in the perception on minorities. Talking about race is something that is just not done. Like, this is completely unseen. It's not in the common mind of diversity and inclusion that we're also talking about minorities. And there is a huge discrepancy between the industry in South Sweden and the population in South Sweden. The population is not reflected in the industry. There is so much more diversity in the population that is not going through the industry. So we went furthermore, and then we started analyzing where does this homogeneity in the industry comes from. How is, because it's not like the industry has particularly human resources problem where they only hire. So where is socially the systemic failure of diversity comes from? And we found out that it begins with education. There is no diversity in the education. There is, even in Sweden, with such a gender equal country, there is a lack of women in programming. There is a lack of women on STEM careers, heavily math careers. There is not that much diversity from the beginning. So there is a huge problem to bring women into these careers, and then the industry is not really attracting the women that are ready to take these careers. The industry is very homogenic, very male-dominated, and that means that they have not quite developed an attractive industry for women, where women are like, oh, this gives me maternity facilities where I can take care of my children and also crunch, and it's just not, it's not working in that sense. Women don't feel that attracted to go to this industry when they study STEM. In the small cases, they study STEM because the problem comes from education. We also find out that there was it's called a cloning culture. That means that we as humans tend to like more people and groups that are similar to us. And that is very reflected in organizations because we tend to create networks. And we found out that the gaming industry is very reliant on the networks. So you need to meet people, network, be part of the group, and then you're gonna get in. No? There was a huge barrier for people that have no previous industry experience to enter the industry. Is one of the barriers that we found out is the hardest to overcome. So that excludes people that don't have from the beginning the connections, the network, or the education to enter the industry. That generates even more homogeneity in the industry. I'm saying the word industry too much, but I hope that you're following me with all this. So this creates that the industry is very white, male dominated, and the perception is that it's very white, male dominated. And this led us to...
And maybe to add on that is also like, we didn't speak to more than one that was in like a top management position, but the way when we were asking questions about what the top management positions were looking like, it was this dominant white male narrative that we was, that was the answer usually. So I think, and that is also part of like, if you look at inequality regimes, it's also important to think about like, even if the organization on a bottom level is diverse in a sense, then the top management is also what builds the company, and which is the important part to look at.
Exactly. So our biggest finding was that the less diversity that exists in the industries in top management, and the inclusivity that the industry sometimes feels it has, is very reliant on the fact that everybody is the same and there is not that much diversity. So this is a very gloomy, but this was our findings. We conclude with, there is a need for more diversity in top management. That is gonna create more opportunities for diversity in the whole organizations. We actually had one very interesting interview where they told us, like, you know, top management, they live in the same neighborhoods, went to the same schools, they are friends from the beginning, they know each other from like ages. So it's a very close community. They drink the same wines, talk the same talks, and this is very hard to enter. And but there is always hope.
Yeah, I feel like we dragged it down a little bit here, but but yeah, there will be change sometime.
And
thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's time for our panel. So I'm gonna welcome up our moderator for today, Albertina Sparrhult.
Voice. Oh, yes. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So, hello. My name is Albertina. I'm going to be moderating a little panel here for you in just a few seconds. And we have some lovely panelists I'm going to invite up. Just sit tight. We're going to invite you soon. I do these things sometimes. I work as a leadership coach. Diversity and inclusion is really important to me. I've also worked with the Swedish games industry a bit before on some of these initiatives, and I come back now and again to also support and host or talk, and that is why I'm here today. So without further ado, I would like you to give a big reaffirming applause for our panel that I want to welcome up to your seats here. Find your way to a chair. Make sure that you are comfortable, or as comfortable as you can be.
Too short.
So we can have an interesting conversation here together today. And in the previous session here, you ended with saying, there will be change. So in this panel, we will talk a little bit about what is the current state right now? What initiatives exist? How are they received? What is going on and what is happening? Are there any trends and so on? And our esteemed panelists are here to enlighten us, hopefully, a little bit and share your thoughts and insights on this. I thought I would put you to work straight away and let you introduce yourselves really quickly. I'm just going to remove this a little bit so you don't hear my breathing like Darth Vader. Is this good? All right, great. Really quickly, who you are and what you do, where you work. Super quick. And you are closest, so
yes.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm Jesper. I'm employed as Business Development Manager at Game Habitat, where I've been for 9 months. I come from a kind of similar position in Denmark. And my connection to this field is generally just that gender and diversity is one of the key values of Game Habitat. So it's my job to ensure that that is also represented in the business development work that we do, which is probably of even more importance in my area, since diversity is even worse when looking at, for example, CEOs and founders and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was the very quick version.
Thank you. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name's Laura. I'm the CEO of The Ground, which is a co-working space here in Malmö, and a co-founder of The House, which is a women's innovation hub. My background, I've worked with people and culture most of my career, all of my career, to be honest. So yeah, and I've worked in the tech industry and a little bit in the games industry in the past.
All right. And Fatime.
And I am Fatime, thank you. Fatime Nedzipovska, work as the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Lead at Avalanche Studios Group. Been there for 6 months now, and have been working with many years when it comes to diversity inclusion. So I've seen a lot. So we have a lot of things to talk about.
Yes, we do.
A lot.
I love it. The panel is brimming with inspiration and ideas. I thought we could open up here with a little rundown from you, Jesper, just on the state of D&I initiatives today. And I just want to point out also that I'm going to say D&I initiatives because it sits easier in the mouth. You're going to grow tired with me if I say diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives all the time. So I'm just going to say D&I. There are many different names for it, so this is just how we gather the concepts for this panel today, just so you know. What is the state of the industry today?
I brought a little cheat sheet with me because I looked up some numbers last evening to bring with me. So I think that a fun way to start is like looking at Sweden, for example, compared to a larger perspective. So I mean, in Sweden, the latest number says that 23% of the people employed in the industry are female. So I mean, what would your guess be? Is that better or worse than the European average? I can tell you it's actually 0.7% worse than the European average, which is kind of interesting because, you know, the Nordic countries, we usually feel that we are pretty ahead in, you know, equality. But actually in this area we're not. Interestingly enough, some of the countries that have a more even distribution are Eastern European countries, maybe because their industries are much younger. Because I think, you know, one of the things is that we have because there's so many people in the industry already in Sweden, it takes a long time to change because we have like a huge legacy, you know, of people already employed that already represent, you know, this imbalance. So that might be why that it's younger countries and some of the ones with the biggest, with the most equal distribution are Eastern European countries with a fairly young games industry.
When I started in the games industry, like 2007 or something like that, it was 2%.
Yeah.
So some things are happening. There is change.
Yeah, I believe the Swedish numbers are going up like 1% a year or something on average, something like that.
What else do you have for us in there?
Well, I can say that if you're looking at CEOs and founders, it's much worse. So but you know, I used to actually, my first real job was at Microsoft, and there I learned that it's not problems, it's opportunities. So we have an opportunity to improve diversity in the industry. There are no like super firm numbers on CEOs and founders, but recently there was a book published by a guy called Kim Bergström, I think, a book called Up, Down, Up, and he did like his own impromptu survey of the people he interviewed, of some VCs, and he found that in the industry, at least the ones you were looking at, there were 12% of the companies had female CEOs, and there were 9% had female founders. So that's like even worse than the general distribution. And actually, there's also a Swedish project called All In that's looking at specifically gender and diversity in the games industry that found that if you look, for example, at solo developers, only 2% of them are women. So that's like some weird corner that's like extremely dominated by men. Then I mean, the general outlook is that it has some public funding has begun to look at diversity and inclusion as a factor as well. So it means there are some external factors that are pushing this as well. I mean, it's not super aggressive yet. Most places, it's just that you need to report, you know, what is the composition of your team.
What external factors are we talking about?
Oh, that's, for example, if you go and apply for money for Creative Europe, or not in Sweden, but both in the game support systems in Denmark and Norway, they both require you to fill out, you know, sheets of what the lead positions on the projects, what are their gender. So at least, you know, there are beginning to be some interest and some external pressure to say, hey, you should look at this.
All right. So I want to pause you there and let Laura and Fatime in a little bit as well. How does this land the things that Jesper bring up?
Well, I'm not surprised. No. So no surprise at all. But there has been change, yes. But I think that the change that needs to be done now needs a bit more discussions than a bunch of checklists of what things we need to do to make this change. I think that a lot of leaders within the industry and other industries as well don't really understand why this is important. They have heard it, that it is important, but they don't know why it's important for their own business, for their own company.
Why is it important?
Well, it depends. My favorite answer. It depends on what company and industry you're looking at. Yeah. For some, they want to make a profit. For some, they want to keep their people. For some, they want to attract talents. It depends on what you want with it. And when you're not clear enough, when you don't have a common ground to stand on, when it comes to D&I, it will be very difficult to work with it because then it will become a bunch of checklists. And we don't want that. Checklists are out.
So what I'm hearing you saying, actually, in your response, is that it affects many different areas and many different strategic priorities that you can have as a company. It affects most of them.
Yes.
Yeah, or if not all of them. I can see you nodding also, Laura. Do you want to comment also on this?
I think, I just agree. I think it's like culture washing. If you tick the right boxes and you do what you do just to kind of, so the percentages go up, that's, what is that actually achieving? I've seen so many times where it's like, okay, we need a female CTO. Why do you need a female CTO? What is the goal from that? Is that to tick that checkbox, or is that because she's actually going to bring something to the company? And I think that's the issue. It shouldn't be about checkboxes. It should be about talent.
All right. So, with that, I would like to direct a question towards you, Fatime. You work at Avalanche, and as I understand it, you have a diversity and inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy that you are applying at Avalanche. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So when I started at Avalanche, it was very important to both to me and the company management to actually set a strategy, set a direction for how are we going to work with DEI. And the first thing that we decided on is that we need to have focus areas to begin with, because we're working both with people and with games, and you can't have the same strategy for people and games. They're two completely different. Everyone's agreeing here. Okay, good. Preach to the preacher. So it was very important to understand that we need different kinds of strategies here. How do we work with people? How do we hire them, attract them to Avalanche, but also how do we keep them? How do we work with the culture at our workplace? When it comes to the games, it's completely different, because changing the DI in games takes a bit longer time. You need to involve different kinds of stakeholders within the company. Need to do a lot of trainings, of course, so that we also can have a stand on a common ground to understand why are we doing this? Why do we need DI in games? That could be the first question you can actually ask.
Is there an answer?
Of course, but that's a longer conversation. We can take it at the breakfast later. So you need those conversations as well then. So yes, so our strategy is looking at both at the people and the games. And I think it's very important to be honest with yourself and within the company, that you can't have just a general DI strategy, because then that will take much longer time to create a change. You need to be focused on at least one thing to create the change you want.
What are your thoughts on this, hearing about this sort of almost like dual track that you have for diversity and inclusion? How does that land with you? Does it make sense?
I think so. I mean, our approach is probably a bit different, but that's because, at least from where I'm sitting. You know, I was employed just 9 months ago, so I've had the luxury of being able to start up a lot of new stuff. So that means that I can consider diversity and inclusion from the get-go. So instead of trying to infuse it into something existing, I can, at least to a degree, or we can to a degree, consider it a factor when building something new. So for example, we are now looking to build a formal support program, and then when creating that, we can, in the actual creation, have diversity as inclusion as a goal or a target, and make sure that that is part of it from the beginning. But then, of course, we also have specific initiatives to address diversity and inclusion, like Gym Week.
So yes, that's also why we're here. A lot of us. It's so nice to see such a wide, big, and diverse audience. By the way, you say formal support from the get-go. What kind of support are we talking about?
Oh, this is like a business development program.
That you have here at Game Habitat?
Yeah, or at least that we are supposed to have in the near future.
And do you have examples of how you have that as part of your approach from the beginning?
Yeah, actually, it's not formalized yet, but we're actually talking to, because we're talking to Iliana from Wings, and also Bobby, who's also part of Game Habitat, who have helped me, look through, the things I've written and said like, okay, maybe we could change this, maybe we could change some of the wording, and we've also put in like a specific diversity target, where we say that we want to have 25% of the founders to be female. And I mean, it hasn't been finalized yet, but that's to have that as a goal. And then the people in our team who have the expertise on that, they will help me go through it and make sure that the wordings and the images we use and the places we try to spread the message, that those are appropriate when trying to reach outside of the bubble.
So I hear tone of voice. I hear including the right people. I also hear metrics and measurements. I would like to hear, or I think all of us would like to hear, also some more examples of how you're actually implementing these strategies. I will return to you in a second, Fatime, and just let Laura tell us a little bit about your approach to working with D&I at the house and in extension the ground.
So the house was kind of created or evolved from the need for women to have a voice, to get a check, to have access to, especially in the startup scene, of having the basics that men get all the time. And it's not kind of trying to do the usual creating our own table somewhere else. It's just creating a bigger table that we can all sit around. And it's on the concept of that you should, that women don't get the check that often, and they don't get access to funding, and there has to be this conversation as to why. And if no one wants to answer that why, then we'll just try and fix it and try and solve it ourselves. So that's where the house is trying to create this community and co-create how we want to have education on funding, on creating a startup, on how to do, how to kind of become successful, introducing them to the right players, getting those players educated as to why women founders are just as important, if not more, and just having those conversations. And I think that's what the bones of D&I is about, is conversations. You have to learn why there is inequality, why it's important that we fix the inequality, why you can't make a poster person, if there's a person in your company that ticks all the boxes, don't make them the poster girl or the poster boy of your company. Just having those educations. And I think what Fatime said of splitting it, of course our games also need to have equality shown in them and diversity inclusion, because that's where young generations will get. It's like movies. The more difference you see in a movie and a game, the better. But then the actual people making that game have to understand why also. So it's, I think that's why the ground as well, when I took over the ground, it was very Swedish, and I wanted it to become a home where people could, I say home because it feels like home, a home where people could come and be themselves. And it didn't matter whether you spoke Swedish, English, from anywhere in the world, you could come somewhere and know you were going to feel included.
I hear you talking a lot about community and communication. I have a question here. So when we talk about communicating with each other and how important networking is and having the right conversations, how much do you think the conversations should be about diversity and inclusion, knowledge, why, etc., that you mentioned, and how much do you think it is just the fact that connections help you get ahead and not feeling lonely help you get ahead? What is the balance there, would you say?
Obviously, in a fantastic world, there wouldn't need to be conversations and education. It would just be real life. But I think, it's the conversations are the part that needs to happen right now, to have the reasons why. Why is this important? Why do female founders need to be seen more? Why do we need to have like a department that can actually teach a whole company why it's important. It's like hopefully one day we won't need your role, unfortunately, but it's like we would like to get there.
I can see Fatime is nodding enthusiastically.
Yeah, somebody hire me later.
Tell us what you're thinking, Fatime.
Something that I was thinking about when we were talking here is that it's so important that when you communicate in general about DEI or something close by, is that it's not always you need to use those words, because it's not always about that for the people you're working with. As when we were working with our employees, I can't just walk around and be like, okay, let's talk about diversity inclusion, everyone, and everyone's going to be like, yeah, let's do this. I'd rather talk about what makes you feel safe at work. What do you need to feel safe at work? What do you need to feel seen, heard? What do you need as support as a manager to support your team, to make them grow, to make them thrive? You need to use that kind of language to actually have those conversations to make that change. And it's the same with the games. We want people who are playing our games to also feel seen, heard, seen and heard. And we can do that through the storytelling, through the characters we're using. So I think it's you build a community around the communication. So they need each other. Yeah.
Do you have some more examples of how you're implementing your DE&I strategy at Avalanche?
Yeah, sure. Quite in different ways. We're looking at what challenges we have, of course, but we don't look at the challenges that we only have in short term, because there are some, of course, many things you can just tick off the box and fix them, and then you're good and all right. We are also looking at what we can work on the long term, and I think a lot of companies who are working with DI are missing on that one, on how to work on long term. Because it's difficult, it takes time to see the results, everyone wants to see them right away, but you need that time to actually make the change you want to see, if that makes sense. Does that make any sense? Yeah, people are nodding.
I see nods.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
nods.
You
I
are
see
making
nods.
sense.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yes. But it doesn't make sense for everyone because they want to see the results right away. So when we are working with our initiatives within DI, we have to work with both short and long-term initiatives, both because there are some low-hanging fruit that we actually can do, and it's not a bad thing to work with short-term goals, but also because you want to see that, look, it actually makes a difference. It actually makes a difference when we set resources, or if we set time to work with X, Y, Z, this happens. And I think when it comes to DEI in general, you need to show people proof all the time.
How do you do that?
By showing the results.
And what kind of results are we talking about?
We can talk, for example, about, let's say about ERGs, perfect example, employee resource groups, that a lot of companies have. It's quite big in Northern America. It's growing now in Europe as well, where employees gather around a common topic or interest, where they have seen that they want to create a certain change within the company. It could be an ERG that is around neurodiversity, women, LGBTQ+, and so on. And they are usually the ones who are noticing things that they would like to change. And by working with them, for example, and see what we can do both right away, but also how we can work on long term, we can actually show, like this is what we did.
Okay.
Through collaboration, through listening, and working together.
So you set goals, and you also define together what success would look like.
Definitely.
And involving the right people, again, like you mentioned, Jesper, and also you, in that conversation.
Yes.
I'm curious about something, but before I'm going to ask that, I just want to check in with Elin. How are we on time? 5 minutes left. All right, okay. Let's see if I can catch my train of thought. Yes, so once you have set those goals, in a very short horizon here, how do you communicate that? Or do you just communicate when the results happen, or do you say, hey, now we have these goals? Like how does that work?
It depends on what we're working on, of course. Sometimes, yes, you present it when you have the results, but sometimes it takes so much time that you have to present how the process is going, and also because during the process you have to involve other people as well, other stakeholders. So I'd say it's both during and after the process.
Thank you. One thing that you all mentioned, actually, before we did some prep work, before we came here, believe it or not, is culture. What role does culture play when it comes to diversity and inclusion? You can decide who goes first.
Obviously, culture is massively important. I see culture of a company as like the bones of the company, but not the written culture in the book that you handed on the first day of the job. Like it might be great that it mentions, oh, in our culture we do this, this, and this. That's not your culture. Your culture is what's happening in the kitchen, where your employees are gathered and having those coffee conversations and arranging those nights out or those football games. Or that's your culture. And I think that's what's the most important thing. That's where you're going to get your psychological safety. That's where you're going to get the trust, and that's where you're going to get the team feeling like they are part of something. Instead of just a 9-to-5 job, they're actually going to feel like the blood of the company can run through their veins if your culture's that good. And that's then going to help with hiring more talent, but keeping the talent you also have. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, culture is very important to me, and I see it as very important for a company. And I think as well, especially in the tech and gaming industry, innovation will only happen if you have a creative, happy team, and culture is extremely important for that.
In the talk just before here, innovation was also mentioned. Is that something that you recognize, that there is a connection between D&I and innovation as well?
Me?
I was thinking if you could decide on your own, but I can also dish out the questions.
Well, of course. I mean, you can see it both in research. It says it. But you can also see it at your company, or the people you're working with, the people you're meeting. Just in general, when you're meeting people, if you are together with people who are just like you will get good ideas. But if you start inviting people who don't think just like you will get new perspectives. You will get better other ideas, or even better. But there is so much research around it, and if that can't convince people, then I don't know.
If we look ahead into the future a little bit, what are some challenges that you see on the horizon? Do you want to take a stab at that, Jesper?
I mean, I would think that a possible challenge is that now is the time we're going to see, if D&I, if that's a nice to have or need to have, because right now the state of the industry is that funding has pretty much dried out. People are being laid off everywhere. So it's a question about everywhere they are cutting, like all unnecessary stuff they're cutting away. So the question is, how do we make sure that diversity and inclusion is still a need to have, and is not one of those nice to have that is going to be cut away and disregarded, because now it's all about a focus on survival. So I think that's a challenge. And I think another challenge is also to make sure that the divide between the developers and the players doesn't become bigger. Because I think that, at least to some degree, within the industry, there is an understanding of the value of diversity. Not only with regards to innovation, but also with regards to actually, just having a nice workplace, having a more diverse workplace with genders and socioeconomic status and, the cultural background, that makes for a more enjoyable place to work. So I think that the industry, at least to some degree, has an understanding of the value of this. I'm not sure the players necessarily have that understanding of value, because at least sometimes you'll still have the arguments, also because some of the people being very vocal are the ones who say, oh, you got woke in my game, or why is there politics in my game, and why does it have to be a woman, and all that. And I think that that's a hurdle we have to overcome. That understanding of the value of diversity also has to be brought out to the players, so that they will also appreciate it and also be able to appreciate it vocally, and not just in a small community where they can say, "Yeah, it's actually quite nice what you're doing."
Laura and Fatime, challenges ahead.
I think, the challenges are to do what we say. Because right now we're doing a lot of talking, and I think the challenges ahead are to actually put that into action. Whether that, no matter what industry, it needs to be put into action. It doesn't need to be 20% in 10 years' time. It needs to be 50-50. But for me, I have a lot of faith in Gen Z. The more research I read about Gen Z, and I've worked with a few now, and I remember thinking I was going to mentor, but I actually feel like I became a mentee of Gen Z, because they want to ask why. Why is it like this? Why are we doing it like this? So I have a lot of faith that we have a brighter future ahead, to be honest, because we're going to have a generation that asks why, instead of just taking it.
From my perspective, I'm seeing two challenges. One of them is that the world keeps changing all the time. The way we talk about DEI today, we will not talk about it next year. Gen Z is coming in, they're asking why, and we need to know the answers. And if we don't, they're not going to like working with us. So we need to understand how the world works every day, and it changes so fast, and you should be aware of that. It doesn't take 50 years till we have a new world or so. It changes so fast. The second part is that there are a lot of people working as DEI leads or managers and so on in different companies. And I think the biggest challenge they usually have is that today it's not enough with just having a passion for working with DEI. You need to understand the business side as well, so that you actually can work within the company and work in the context you're in. It's not enough it's not enough being passionate. You have to understand where you're at and bring those two together.
It's hard to know where you're going and what direction to take out if you don't know where you are right now. With that, I think we are out of time. Do you have? I'm gonna be naughty and say, do you have any final things that you would wish to say that you feel you need to get off your chest before we close off and open up for questions?
Just connected to the culture question, all of you are culture. It's not. It shouldn't be stated in a strategy or blaming the company management that they're not doing enough. All of us are a part of a culture. We are the ones who are actually creating it. So don't back off from that responsibility. You can already do something today, regardless if you're working with DI or not. So take that with you.
All right. Thank you so much, lovely people, for sharing your insights and knowledge and experience. Let's give them a... And I think we do have some time for questions. Yeah? All right. So let's hear it. Do we have any questions in the audience? I thought we could go a little bit back and forth. Since we have one here, maybe we can take that, and then we jump over to the stream. Do we have questions in the stream? Yes, great. All right, let's start here.
Yeah. Hi. Great talk. So I'm curious, like, how do you include one group without excluding another? And I have an experience of this as well, where I have been applying for funding, and like I found the perfect source of funding, but it's only aimed towards entrepreneur women of diverse background, for example. So yeah, I guess and I imagine like women having it even way worse, but my question is, how do you include one group without excluding another?
Who wants to answer?
Do you want that?
can't speak about funding in general, but maybe from a recruitment perspective, I think that the most important thing is that you hire the best one, period. If your pipeline is a bunch of white males, then you need to do some more work, of course. You need to look everywhere else as well. But still, in the end of the day, you need to pick the right one for the job. That's my perspective on it.
And what about unconscious bias?
They exist.
And how does that play in when we're trying to pick the right one?
A lot. You rather hire, promote the ones who are just like you, of course. But as I said, from my perspective as a DI lead, it should be the right person for the job. But you need to look everywhere else at the same time. You can't keep recruiting from the same networks all the time or same places all the time. And if you look...
Independent of what those sources are.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough. What about online? Do we have any
so we have one question online from Kimmy. She's fairly new to the games industry and had a good experience overall herself, but feels that there are issues in terms of representation and sexism in games and so forth. And also in terms of how much equality affect, for instance, work environment and mental health and so forth. So her question is basically, what are some of the biggest consequences of inequality in the games industry, would you say?
I can answer that I have like a fun anecdote about that. Back in the day, I used to be a developer myself, and the first game I worked on, actually the second professional game that I worked on, I was just an external. I was an audio designer. It was all guys, and they made a game. Was like, oh yeah, there's going to be some action RPG, and there's going to be like 4 classes, and all of them were men. And that was not. It wasn't an active decision. It just happened. Because that was who the team was. And so like afterwards, I was like, something I asked them, well, why are they all men? It's like they have no answers because they hadn't considered it at all. They hadn't entered their mind because they were this like very homogeneous culture. So it's like they made game characters in their own image. So I mean, there's you know you limit your creative input by having a very homogeneous group producing that.
And why is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Yes, because we're not making toilet paper.
Oh,
we're making
Nice.
Sorry.
we're making cultural products. You know, products that have story and meaning and communicate something to someone. And for that, I think that we have a responsibility to try and represent as widely as possible, because it is not just a product we're making. It's a message, experience, story, something more than that.
Do you want to add something?
I think just being a girl gamer, I won't have a mic on. I will not have a mic on. It is a horrible place out there for a girl to be gaming. Embarrassingly, it's Fortnite, so it's usually 14-year-old boys, but that's another issue. But it's just, if I want to dress as a woman in the game, it's the big boobs, big bum, or a man skin. That's the only options you have.
Like barbarian female armor, like here's my chainmail bikini.
And then you get spoken to terribly over the internet. So I think it's like you say, because it's such a homogenous industry still, even on like they get to play as men, you get to talk down to women. It all needs a change. It needs to, and I think if we start changing the games and the companies that change the games, that's a great starting point, because then it's not going to be that women have to play as these characters. It's like the Little Mermaid. I know some people hated it, some people loved it, but when people could look at the Little Mermaid, the recent one where it was Halle Bailey, and see she looks like me, that created so much comfort for young girls. It's just the same thing. It's that you need to be able to play something and feel that there's a quality around it.
Adding to that, I will say that there is a strong connection between innovation and diversity. And to solve complex problems, diversity is required. And if you want to stay competitive on a global market, you need to be innovative. So there is also economical consequences and competitive consequences to not being diverse. I will say that I play games online. I play with my mic on. And a consequence for me is that people just don't focus anymore. Either it's, oh, go back to your Barbies, yes. Or it's like, do you want to go on a date? And I'm like, but we're losing mid. What are you doing? What are you doing? Just play the game, for God's sake. So, I mean, on a personal level, even if it's not, harassment, or it is harassment, screw that, it's harassment, but, it might be difficult for you to just play if that's what you want to do. Yeah. And it also does something to the person who is treating somebody else like that, What kind of relationships are you having, if that's how you look at the people around you? Sorry, I'm going to shut up. Yes. Do we have more questions?
When someone else.
Passion. It drives me. That's a problem.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
I have a question around the employee network groups. I am a DI lead of a company as well, but we have like one diversity inclusion focus group with a bunch of diverse people. But do you feel like it's better to maybe have a different, smaller focus group than to have one bigger one? I mean, it's of course depending on how big the company is and such. But I was just curious around that and what types of focus groups that you have.
That's a very good question because I'm not going to say it depends, but I would more say that we have focused ERGs today. But we also have employees who feel like, I don't feel like I belong to any of those. I want to belong to a group where I actually can contribute with my passion for DI and allyship. So we're like on the different side of it. So I would say, is it better? Yes, maybe for those who would like to have their own platform, their own group, where they can focus on the topic. For that reason, yeah, it's good. But it's also good to have that group of people who just wants to simply contribute in general. So I would say try to keep that one, but open up for the more focused ones as well. If there's an interest, you don't have to force people.
Do we have more questions online? No? And then we had a question in the front, I think.
Hey, thank you so much for your talk, for your presentations. And there was a number of points like which I want to, I don't know, come back again, and maybe I'll ask you to elaborate a little bit. Like, yeah, one big elephant in a room in a country is, crisis, layouts, as you mentioned, Jesper mentioned. And I feel it might influence a lot of our ambition of inclusion and diversity at the places, because at times of crisis we all lean towards the more stable or more known or something more close to us. It is also true, and the numbers and statistics and the researchers would say that the innovation actually sometimes comes with a change, with the migrants, with the newcomers, with the people with the different perspectives. And sometimes it's a weird creature to choose, probably, like, oh, who it is, like it's a woman in a gaming or developer, never see that, where this education comes. But you probably will agree that that sometimes happens. And with this, I also want to kind of, bounce back the thing about like choosing the right person, or that instead of ticking boxes, we're choosing talents. Because sometimes, and in most cases, talents is also depends on upbringing. So it's not that the talented girl who never had access or was not invited in the crowd of developers would stand out and get the job immediately. So I do believe that sometimes the quotas or ticking the boxes is important to also bring on the table those who probably didn't have that access, but maybe there is another take on that. And you can say like also about how to enter the industry, how to enter the job market, especially in the times of crisis, and especially when most of the companies in the business, and I can totally understand why, is leaning toward the getting the experienced people instead of taking the risk and taking the weird newcomers, new creatures, newly educated graduates. If I may hear any of your opinions. Thank you.
Do we have comments here on this these thoughts?
I think for me, and you spoke about it at the beginning, is the cloning kind of mentality of that you hire what you know, and I think that just closes everyone off to innovation. Especially, I think for you to have an innovative company and to have a great culture, you need that diversity, you need those different talent pools, you need to bring fresh ideas in, different kind of, different backgrounds, I think the more you do that is the magic to something fantastic. And I think, people need to stop doing the cloning and actually think about opening up to more diversity. Definitely.
I would also like to add that it's so important to have this is the thing, when you have a company management that really prioritize this, then it is a bit easier, if we're being honest. And it's important to look at how the system works within the company, how our processes look like. So it's not only dependent on the people who are applying to the jobs and even those who are not applying because they're afraid of getting a no. It is so much on the companies as well. When they understand and know why they want to have a diverse workforce, they need to create the changes in the processes. They need to look, how does our recruitment processes look like? Who are the ones who are interviewing? What kind of questions do we ask? What are we looking at when we're reading a resume, for example? Who are we referring to if we're having referral programs, for example, and so on. So you need to change on the long term. That should be the focus, and it should be on the companies to begin with. But it goes much, much, much faster when you have a company management that's really has the thumbs up for initiatives like that.
Leadership support is a big thing.
Very big thing.
Top down.
Probably it doesn't stop, at the funnel in. It's also who do you promote, for example, and how do you make sure that people are seen and connected within your company, and how do seniors get an idea of what it's like to be a junior in your company, and so on. Having mentorship programs, etc., etc. Do we have time for more questions, or how are we doing?
Yeah, but I actually have one comment.
Sorry.
That's just, because you said about the checkboxes. So I think that, also related to the question about, funding that was specifically set aside for special groups, that is that in some circumstances, the checkboxes need to be there. Because they force you to make an effort. Because otherwise it can just become, fluffy talk that's in that employee handbook. That's not really culture, but it's just, cover your ass strategy. Like, oh yeah, we are really into diversity. Look, it says in the handbook. So sometimes you need to kind of brute force the changes. And I think that is, of course, coming from your perspective, it becomes what's it called, unfair. Because you say, I have a project here that is as good as another one, and that got chosen because of whoever made it. And that is, of course, that is a problem, and that is a difficult balance. Because then they've chosen to say, we're going to brute force this and force some more female founders into the system by choosing them exclusively. But that, that's also because I think that the nice way to do it is, of course, to make sure that you recruit and you promote and you make it super broad so that the applications you get, whether it's a position or a project, they are as wide as possible and have as wide a representation. But in that case, you can also sometimes risk that things take very, very long to change. As we talked about, the gender distribution in Sweden changes about 1% a year or something. So that means it'll take another 25 years for it to be in balance, which would be equivalent to the people playing it actually.
And it's still a bit faster compared to other countries, not all maybe, but if you compare globally, this 1% a year, is it less or more, do you think?
That's just me talking out of my, yeah, it's my general
You're
impression
behind?
is that it goes
All
very
right.
slow. I think it's about that. I didn't check up on that.
All right.
But that is why we've been
Thank you
talking
for your
about how
honesty.
just having checkboxes is it's not inherently bad. It can't stand alone, and you can use it for occasional diversity washing. But sometimes it's good because it means that you have some kind of obligation, or you have some concrete measurement.
But it's also right because there are already the unconscious bias that exists already has checkboxes. You know, whether you're aware of it or not, you know, somebody looks more like you, somebody feels more relatable, have a similar background, etc. So by adding a different type of checkboxes, you're forcing people to think outside of the box. And of course, that's not the only, you know, the only front that we should work on, but it does serve a purpose.
Yeah,
like
yeah, and
you're
I mean, it also means that, for example, that there's the industry being the way it is, it means that you have an inherent disadvantage because you have a reduced number of, for example, role models for diversity, CEOs, founders. That's like 10%. So it's like that you already are at a disadvantage regarding that.
Thank you for bringing that up also. Are we out of time?
So. Did you have one?
I
think it's the short one, but you're all going to stay around for breakfast, so if you haven't got a chance to ask your questions, please save them for later.
It's actually just to like add something to that discussion about like ticking boxes and taking people in, because when we were talking to people, it was also very common that there was on one hand a very like strong belief in like how the system was very meritocratic, that people were there because they had the merits, which most people do, but on the other hand, when they were describing the culture and who were in which positions, it was very homogenic, and they were actually not that happy about that. So maybe this also like this concern of, oh, if we are taking in people from minority groups, for example, then it's unfair, but maybe it's just because we don't really think of it as an unfair system, but if we actually look at the structure, it is. Yeah, it was just to add on from the pieces.
Great. Thanks. All right. I think that is it for now for the panel. Thank you for being here on this journey for a while, a couple of minutes. And I think it's time for breakfast, which we all deserve, both the audience and the panel and the organizers. Let's give it up one more time.
Nice. Yeah, just two ending words. Thank you again so much for joining, both you here and also online. Please stay as long as you want. We're going to have some breakfast here now. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to just put out the buffet. But yeah, please hang around, ask your questions, meet new people. And thank you. Bye.